Check. All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Sorry, we're about 5 minutes late because I had to go potty. It was my fault. So, yeah, my name's Cole. I'm with Stages of Recovery. I've actually been married for 14 years. That bio's a little bit outdated, so don't tell my wife that you heard that, okay? She knows I know. She knows I know. So I'm doing this presentation. I'm going to give you a little bit about the brain. For some of you, this is going to be really rudimentary. I'm not going to lie. Some of you know this already. So it's not necessarily just for your edification. Buddy's part is more for your edification, and then the Q&A hopefully will be. But part of the reason we're doing this is as an extension of HEARD. So if you don't know about HEARD, I kind of wanted to set that up for you. HEARD stands for Helping Every Adolescent Reach Their Dreams. The booth is right out here, so literally if you walk out these doors and straight in front of you, you'll see the HEARD table right there. We are a community coalition, and our main job as a coalition is to prevent substance use in the region, basically. And so one of the things that we've talked about a lot as an organization is how do we do that? How do we advocate for prevention, advocate for substance use decrease, substance use decrease, in particularly in adolescents and children in our community, without reinventing the wheel. None of us, we're all volunteering our time on this coalition, and so one, I would like to invite you to come volunteer your time on the coalition, especially if it's something you feel strongly about. But two, I'm not a prevention specialist. I think it's even debatable whether I'm a treatment specialist at this point, but I'm definitely not a prevention specialist. I don't have prevention curriculum. I don't go into schools. That's not my thing. I'd be happy to do it, but I don't. So I don't know. I think there's other people in this room that are way better at it than I am. And if you're not in this room, they're out in the community, right? Jafar was a great example of that, right? Jafar is doing the work out in our community on a professional basis, and he's got the evidence-based practices to back it up, and he's doing good work with our youth in our community. So how do we still support the work of what's going on in the community as a coalition without duplicating the work from a volunteer standpoint? And so one of the things we stumbled upon was this idea of doing this town hall. So what you're seeing here is actually the second time we're getting a chance to do it. The first time we got a chance to do it at the YWCA. And essentially the idea is that the HEARD Coalition, our members, right now it's just been me and Buddy. There's been other members that have participated, but nobody else has come on stage. So again, come volunteer. We'd love to have you. But this idea of having a town hall and not really so much having this major agenda or doing a bunch of education with parents and kids like you would get in a prevention curriculum, but just having a conversation, inviting people to come and be a part of this and have a conversation with us. And so rather than duplicating the wheel, let's just go to organizations that are already serving youth in our community and ask them if we can talk about substance use with their participants, right? And so we did this with the YWCA. We've got some talks with some other organizations to try to do the same thing. And so you take your already built-in youth and parents that you have in your program, and we just come in and support the work you're doing by doing this town hall, opening up the conversation, and then being a support system for you as you continue to go along, right? So examples of that would be the YWCA again, Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters. There's lots of applications for this, right? I could go down a big long list of organizations that we could partner with to do this. And essentially all we do is we show up, we do a little bit of education about the brain, which is what you're gonna hear from me. Buddy does a little bit of education about how we talk to our kids about substance use, and then we just talk. Let's do a Q&A session. What do you wanna know as a parent? What do you wanna know as a kid about substance use? What can we do to talk to each other? How can we create a dialogue that's gonna be important? Buddy will give you some more information about that here soon, but one of the things that we realized for sure is that kids kind of want to talk to their parents, right? They may not be the top person they want to talk to all the time, but they do want to talk to their parents. It shows up in survey statistics over and over again. So how can we empower parents to do the work that we need them to do in home? And so that's why we're here. So that was the basis for this. This is where I start. Many of you have seen this idea before. Most of us in this room included, we've had kind of some of our myths shattered over the last few years. Over the last, well, maybe 10 years, 15 years, we've had some of the myths shattered about what happens inside the brain whenever we use substances. But for many years, starting in the 80s, maybe a little before the 80s, right? This was what we thought of substance use, right? This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs, right? And that was really the best education we got as a society, right? Not as helping professionals necessarily, but as a society, that's the best we got. And that doesn't even come close to summing up exactly what goes on inside the brain whenever somebody uses substances. So everybody remembers, there's my wife and kids. I always put them on my slide because I wouldn't be able to do this without them. Pretty simple stuff, right? We've got the habit cycle. What I want to point out, while this is mostly about substances, one of the things I talk about my clients, with my clients and with other people, just out in the community and stuff, is that this habit cycle happens for all of us all the time, all day, every day, with all kinds of things that we do, right? It happens with ice cream, it happens with exercise, it happens with video games, it happens with sex, it happens with even simple things like journaling or playing music, stuff that we don't always think of as bad for us, right? Or addicting. It happens over and over again. And so basically we have a cue, a pleasurable activity happens. We get a reward from it, which is the dopamine that releases inside our brain. The sides of our brain here store it in our memory, and then our brain wants to revisit that thing over and over again because of the dopamine release that it got. Our brains really like dopamine. So has anybody in here ever been a baby before? Okay, so anybody in here ever held a baby before? Okay, so babies, I don't know if you know this or not, but babies are really reliant on outside providers to get their needs met, right? The only way a baby's gonna get fed is if somebody comes and feeds it. The only way a baby's gonna get their poopy diaper changed is if somebody comes and changes it, right? And so we are hardwired from very early on, obviously from birth, all the way for the next 2 years, roughly, to be really reliant on external forces to change the way we feel, right? I cannot change the way I feel by myself. We start to do some different things like sleep training and potty training to try to help children regulate their emotions and regulate their, be able to self-soothe and do some of these things, right? But for the most part, we're still really reliant on those outside providers for us. Then we get to about 2 years old and we realize that I can manipulate the environment around me to get what I want, right? I can throw a fit at 8 o'clock at night and throw myself on the ground because I want chocolate milk. And if you've got a dad like me, he might cave, actually, and give you the chocolate milk you want at 8 o'clock at night, right? And that's to get that sugar cue with the dopamine pop that we get, and all because we remembered that chocolate milk tastes good a week ago, right? Or a day ago, or however long. And so we start this cycle very early on in our lives, and we realize that this is a very, very easy way for us to get what we want. And unfortunately for most of us, right, it's happening, I don't remember what slides I had, it's been a while. Unfortunately for a lot of us, let me see if I can skip ahead here. There it is. Unfortunately for all of us as humans, it's just part of the human condition, that process that takes place, that habit cycle that I was telling you about, happens mostly, is this it? Happens mostly right here in the limbic system, right? This right here is the cortex that we think about. Most of y'all probably know that. So the cortex is what we think of as our thoughts and our feelings, right? That's the logical, like, I'm using a lot of my cortex right now to talk with y'all, right? You're hopefully using a lot of your cortex to listen to me right now, right? Our limbic system is responsible for a lot of things, but primarily what we use in this situation is fight or flight, right? So I'm walking along, I'm hiking through Caprock Canyon State Park, and all of a sudden I see a snake, and my body reacts, and I jump away from the snake, right? And then that's the limbic system. The limbic system tells me, oh my God, there's a snake, jump away. And then After a few seconds, my cortex is now brought back into the equation, and I look back at it, and I get a chance to really visually process what's happening here, right? Oops, I keep hitting the wrong button. I get to visually process what's happening here, and my brain goes, wait, that's just a stick. That's not a snake. There's no need for me to be afraid. And now my cortex is empowered to continue walking down this path, and my limbic system isn't quite on fire. It starts to calm itself down, right? And so this happens. The limbic system is paying attention no matter what, all the time. No matter what it is that we do, our limbic system's paying attention. And not only that, but it prioritizes dopamine because of the feeling that it gets whenever dopamine's introduced. So, just like everybody being a baby, does everybody in here been to middle school before? Junior high, right? So in about middle school was about the time that I was still really motivated by grades. I think a lot of us probably were, hopefully then, late elementary, early middle school. I was still really motivated by my academic performance. And the first time I failed a test, I had this swirling of emotions inside of me, right? And as a young male, I didn't really know how to describe those feelings and emotions. Looking back in hindsight and as an adult, I can describe them as embarrassment and disappointment and failure, and maybe frustration, right? There's a few things that were happening inside my brain, but at the time, I just knew it just kind of felt sucky and I didn't really want to deal with it anymore, right? And so whatever I did next, my brain was paying attention. The limbic system was paying attention. So if the next thing I did was go to the lunchroom and talk with my friends, and my friend said, oh, that's just Mr. Cole. He's kind of a jerk, and he grades tests really hard. Don't worry about him, right? My cortex is brought back online. It calms my limbic system down, and my limbic system remembers that. It stores that into memory and says, well, wait a minute. Every time you feel this feeling, if you go talk to your friends, you feel better. You get a little bit of dopamine, you get a little bit of serotonin, you get a little bit of oxytocin, all these neurotransmitters we talk about, right? And so then, a month later, or, well, let me back up. Some of us, rather than talking to our friends, held out all the way till we could talk to mom or dad at the end of the day, and they were a really supportive family environment. And mom said, you know what, it's just one test. It's okay. What can I do to help you? Can I study with you? Can I do something to help you get better, right? And again, our cortex soothes that limbic system and makes us feel better, and the limbic system pays attention and stores it in our memory, right? Memory's right here. It's real easy to see on me. What I always tell my clients too, as far as the limbic system goes, if you want to know, if you take your finger and put it right in the middle on the top of your head and right in the middle on the side of your head, and imagine where those two meet, that's your limbic system inside your brain. So some of us maybe pulled out our guitar and started playing music or writing poetry. Some of us went to football practice. For some reason, y'all, now that I'm an adult and I've been doing this kind of work for a while, I realized that I craved football. And I wasn't even good. Y'all, I played football for like 2 years in junior high. I was not that good at it. I was more of a baseball guy. But for some reason, my brain and body craved football practice some days. And I could not tell you why until now. And it's because my limbic system was soothed, and it put that in memory. Every time I got to go run around and just smash into other little kids, right? It felt good. And I got a release. I got a release of dopamine from that. My brain stored it in memory and said, ooh, we got to do that again. Today was a crappy day. We got to do that again, right? And unfortunately, some of us found some not so great things to deal with, right? Some of us found pornography or sex. Some of us found, and I'm not casting judgment on any of these. I think you'll find that soon. Some of us found drugs or alcohol. Some of us found exercise. Some of us found disordered eating. You know, you can run the gamut. There's video games, internet, social media, right? Nowadays, there's lots of things that we could do to soothe ourselves. We found that thing, and unfortunately, those things produce more dopamine, and your brain prioritizes dopamine above most other things because of the feeling that it gets whenever it uses the dopamine, right? Regardless of what it is. And so then a month later, I failed my test. My brain is stored into memory, whatever that thing was that I did, right? And maybe it was multiple things, but my brain stored that in there, and I finally get up the nerve to ask that cute girl I had my eye on in junior high out, right? And I say, hey, you want to go out with me? And she goes, ugh, you know, you're bald. No. I'm just kidding. I wasn't bald until high school. She says no. And all of those, I've never had this experience before, right? It's the first time I've ever asked a girl out. I've never had this experience before. And all those same feelings, I don't know what that feeling is. Looking back, it's disappointment, failure, embarrassment, frustration, right? All the same feelings I just had whenever I failed the test a month ago, right? And so my brain, even though my cortex doesn't say, oh, I know what to do now. Let's go play some music. That's gonna make me feel better. My limbic system was paying attention the whole time. And it said, I know what'll make you feel better. Because we felt this feeling before a month ago. And when we felt this feeling, football practice made everything better. So let's get to football practice and we'll feel better. And so that's one reason why resiliency factors are so important and something that we talk about all the time, right? Because the more we can put interruptions in between that kid and the joint, or that kid and the alcohol, or that kid and the social media, or that kid and the video game, the more we can put those resiliency factors in between them, the better chance they got of pushing off getting into this weird dopamine cycle, right? But let's say it does happen. We're talking about substances. The same thing happens in most things, but it just so happens that substances are particularly catered towards dopamine release inside the brain. And because of that, I don't know if y'all know this, but dopamine is responsible for lots and lots and lots of things inside our bodies and brains. So here's a bunch of them. You've seen them up on the screen for a while. Hopefully you've got a chance to look. I'm not going to go through all of them, right? But if I don't have enough dopamine inside my body, then I can't pay attention in class. If I don't have enough dopamine inside my body, then I can't lactate as a woman, right? Or a man. It's been known to happen, but I can't, and then not only that, but the one thing that I want to point out here, right? And movement. In low doses, the blood vessels relax. In high doses, blood vessels contract. So that's why we see cardiovascular disease a lot of times with substance users. It also reduces insulin production in your pancreas, another reason why we have high rates of type 2 diabetes in substance users, particularly alcohol, because it has a sugar component too. And then it slows GI or gut movement, gastrointestinal movement, right? And so I don't know if anybody in here has ever met or known an opioid addict, but opioid addicts are constipated all the time. They can't poop because there's so much dopamine inside their system that their GI tract has slowed almost to a complete stop, right? And so the minute they stop using it and that dopamine goes back down to where it's depleted, they have the opposite effect, right? And so that's something that's happening with dopamine inside our brains and bodies over and over again, right? Skipping all this, you saw that wizard brain, lizard brain. Here's all the teen examples. This is the stuff that I just described. I didn't realize I had it on PowerPoint, or else I would have shown you. This is very similar. This process is very similar to type 2 diabetes. I know I mentioned it earlier. But type 2 diabetes is there's something that happens inside the pancreas, right? So we call it a chronic medical issue. But essentially, I like to make the comparison between substance use and type 2 diabetes because most of the time it has to do with sugar intake, right? And so if I am endocrinologist and I have a patient in front of me who has type 2 diabetes who just got out of the hospital, and they had their toe amputated or something, had some neuropathy, we had a toe amputated, do you think that I'm gonna say, okay, well, I'll see you next year. Thanks for coming in to check in on me. Or do you think I'm gonna wanna see that client, that patient, pretty frequently for a while to make sure that they're managing their insulin levels, right? Their blood sugar. On top of that, one thing that I've never heard an endocrinologist say is, you know what, just get out of here. You relapsed for the last time. Just go. You know what, I'm tired of it. We don't do that with substance use, do we? And I agree, I get it. There's some societal issues that come with substance use, right? I don't see a lot of type 2 diabetic people like holding up candy stores or anything like that, you know what I mean? So there's some, but part of that has to do with ease of access to sugar, the cost of sugar, right? All these things, but it's still the same process inside the brain, all right? So, again, the same habit happens over and over again. So when we repeat the cue, so for example, we try a substance, the higher the dopamine the faster this process is. So this process is going to depend on what we use, how much we use, and how often we use, right? So if I have 2 drinks once a week, this is going to be a very, very slow process. This process still is in play even if you have 2 drinks once a week, okay? I want to point that out to you. It is still happening. However, if I have, if I have a couple of lines of cocaine every day, this process is going to happen a lot faster, right? Because cocaine has more dopamine bioavailability than alcohol. I'm using it every day, and I'm using more of it than I would be alcohol, right? So I repeat this cue, so this is going to happen faster. So pretend like this line right here that says normal, right there, that line that says normal is not normal. It's different for every person. But this is the amount of dopamine, these lines, each one of these arrows, is the dopamine that you get. I forget I have the thing. Each one of these arrows is the dopamine that your brain produces for you every single day. So every single day, we all wake up and our brain gives us dopamine no matter what. So we start to get high. I smoke a joint with some friends outside of school. Keep in mind that something I skipped over is that not only does the limbic system play the biggest role in here, but if I'm 13 years old, I basically don't have much of a cortex to begin with. Y'all realize that? The cortex doesn't fully finish developing until they're 23 to 25, okay? So some people in this room, your cortex hasn't even fully developed yet, right? So our ability to make thoughtful decisions is limited the younger we are. And so the limbic system is the only thing our brain has control of, really, at a young age. So we start getting high. This happens over and over again. We get the euphoria. We feel it, right? Our brains and our bodies are hardwired for homeostasis. We've all heard that word before, right? And so basically what that means is how many of y'all graduated from high school, stopped and went to go out in the workforce, and then one day decided to go back to get a degree? That was what I did. Anybody else in here? Did it take like almost an act of God to get you to go back to school? The amount of motivation it takes to go back to school is unbelievable, right? And it's because our brains and our bodies are hardwired for homeostasis. The amount of time and effort it takes to change a job because our brains are hardwired for homeostasis. And so because of that, our brain goes, well, wait a minute. This is a lot of dopamine. Like, I don't know that I can keep doing this, right? And so what it does is it literally stops producing dopamine. It slows down. It's particularly the more I use and the more frequently I use, the faster this happens. Again, I would posit that if somebody were to live, if we were all in this room, the person who has 2 drinks once a week, if they were to live to be 500 or 600 years old, that alcohol use would eventually ramp up to the point where they had a problem with it because of this process right here. It's just a theory, and there's no way for me to actually prove it because we're never probably going to live to be 500 or 600 years old, at least not in my lifetime. But this is my theory, right? And so our brain doesn't produce the dopamine. It goes down. And so what happens is I copied and pasted. So this blue arrow, I copied and I pasted it right here. So there's no difference. So what happens is we use the same, we drink the same 2 drinks, or we do the same 2 lines, or we smoke the same joint, and we get done and we go, wow, well, I don't feel the same way I did yesterday. I got really high yesterday, and now I don't feel so high. This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I was really going for. So what do? Boop, I'll just do one more. I'll take another hit, right? I'll have one more beer. And so the reason why alcohol is so insidious and sneaky is because this process may take 6 months to a year. You might have somebody who drinks 2 drinks every single night, and it takes 6 months to a year before it goes down, and then they add 1 drink on top of it. And so now I'm having 3 drinks every night for 6 months to a year, 2 years, 3 years maybe. And so that's why we see a lot of alcoholics, right, or alcohol use disorders in older people, 50, 60-year-old people, true blue, like I didn't do a lot of weed, I didn't do cocaine. It's because this process is really slow, right? But eventually what happens over time is your brain just totally stops producing dopamine altogether, which is what we call tolerance. So that's how tolerance gets worked out inside our brain, right? And so It doesn't totally, I say that, it doesn't totally stop, because if it totally stopped producing dopamine, you would actually die. So it does give you a little bit of dopamine every day, but not enough for you to feel good. And so this right here, that low arrow right there is withdrawal, it's dope sick, it's hungover, it's a variety of colloquial terms that we use today. And if you go back to that slide on, I'm not going to go back, but if you go back to that slide on dopamine, because it controls all of our involuntary movements, dopamine sends the signal from our brain to our heart to beat. Right now, that's what's happening. It's like the Uber driver of our brain, right? It sends the signal, hey, heart beat, hey, lungs breathe, hey, GI tract move. And so if I don't have enough dopamine inside my brain, right? So let's say this person right here just stops using tomorrow. We pick them up, we throw them in jail. They're an opioid. I'm not saying that jail's bad either. Don't take anything I'm saying as an opinion necessarily. But we pick them up. They're an opioid addict, right? Opioid use disorder. We pick them up and we throw them in jail, and their brain has no dopamine whatsoever at all. Their brain is telling them, no matter how much their cortex, their thoughts and feelings, no matter how much their thoughts and feelings are going to tell them, it's okay. I'm going to be all right. If I can just make it through the next 3 days, I'll survive. I won't die. I'll be okay. I'll get through this withdrawal period and I'll feel better. No matter how much the cortex says that, the limbic system is saying, no, you're going to die. You're going to die right now if you don't get dopamine. You're dying, dude. Our heart is going to stop beating. Our lungs are going to stop breathing. We've got to use right now or else we're going to die, right? And so it's not their fault. It's not a moral problem. It's not something that they did wrong. It just, the way their brain got messed up, right? And unfortunately, this is the way their brain acts from now on. Every time we introduce a substance back into that brain, it's going to immediately go to stop producing dopamine again because of the process, right? So, I'm about to wrap up. We go through this process, active SUD, really high highs, really low lows. We're going to pretend like this line right here is like I'm in a coma, right? So I think objectively everybody in this room would agree that being in a coma versus being alive and like with us right now is worse off, right? But to the person in the coma, there's no good days, there's no bad days. You're just in a coma, right? There's nothing going on. So active substance use, I'm going up and down, really high highs, really low lows, really high highs, really over and over and over again, right? I stop using. I really let that fall through. I go through withdrawal. I really let that go all the way through. I'm not just dope sick anymore. I actually feel the full effects of not having the substance in my brain and body. Excuse me, I just ate lunch. The cortex finally comes back online a little bit, but the limbic system is mostly at work here. I don't have any dopamine. If I can push through that process and put some resiliency factors around me to make sure that I don't go back to using, then I can stop this, I can continue with this process. So then we go into what we call the honeymoon or pink cloud. Hopefully most of y'all are familiar with this. What happens here in this situation is your brain, depending on how long you've been using, some people have been using these substances for 10, 20, 30 years before they finally get to this point. And so what happens is you've trained your brain to think, well, this is what's normal. Your brain, for the last 20 or 30 years, thinks that's normal. And so your brain, by itself, without introducing any new substances into your body, says, we got to get there. We got to get there. And so your brain overworks itself trying to produce dopamine to get high. It thinks it needs to get you high again. And so generally speaking, for anywhere between 2 weeks and 90 days, y'all, 90 days. How long do people go to residential treatment for? 28. Maybe 60, the most is 90, right? So if I get out of residential treatment after 30 days, and my brain's giving me all this dopamine I haven't had in a while, and my wife's talking to me again, and I got my dog back, and everything's great. I got my driver's license. Man, life is great. How can I complain, right? Maybe I didn't have a problem. Maybe I didn't really have the problem that I thought I had. But what they don't realize is that their brain can't keep that up. Your brain keeps trying to keep it up, but it can't. So it hits what we call the wall. And so it's depleted the dopamine that's bioavailable to it by itself without substances. And generally for the next 6 weeks to 6 months, you just kind of feel like doo-doo, right? Just, it's not really like super depressed, like I can't get out of bed. And it's not like suicidal by any means necessarily, right? It's just every day's just kind of ho-hum. I just don't really feel good. No matter how much I exercise, no matter how much I do blank, 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 I just don't feel good. And so because of that, a lot of times people, again, 6 weeks to 6 months, right? If I just went to residential treatment and got out and I managed to make it this far by myself or with the help of some support groups, that could help too, right? Because support groups will help walk you through this process, like 12 steps, smart recovery. Then you can realize that, hey, this gets better too, right? But ultimately, the hiccup for most people in this spot right here is, wait, I just did all of this and this is the best it's gonna get? I've been doing this for 6 months, 5 months, 6 months, and I still feel like I'd rather just get high every day. This is terrible, especially if you've been doing it for 20 years, right? Why would I go to this? It makes no sense, right? And then your brain goes, I get it. I figured it out. Not these high highs, not these low lows. It finally goes through the process of going, wait a minute, I get it. And it starts to even it out, and it starts to give you the normal amount, like what was normal to you, which may be a little depressed, might be a little anxious, right? So that's where psychopharmacology and mental health comes in, the co-occurring aspect of this, right? Is that I might have been depressed before any of that started. And so what's normal to me may not be normal to you, and vice versa, right? So we got to take that into consideration too. But our brains start to adjust. The reason why I say it says, at least our research at Stages says it's, most research right now will say it's anywhere from up to 1 year. We say 18 months because most stimulant, particularly methamphetamine use patients tend to have insomnia, just withdrawal symptoms for much longer than a year. Insomnia, mood swings, irritability, things like that. So their brains are still, even in that process, still adjusting, right? So if I have made it this far, I've got a year sober, I've got a year clean and sober, I've made it this far, the reason why people go back out right here and decide to start using again is because that is really boring when you've been doing this your whole life, right? And so it's not just the substances, it's about all the other stuff that we do too, right? We've got to find a way to make life bearable without the use of substances on top of that. Because to a 22-year-old, to a 21-year-old, which Buddy knows all about too well, right? This is a pretty boring life right here. One that I don't necessarily want to be a part of, right? And so we've got to find ways to have fun that isn't centered around substances in general, right? And that's a societal problem, because whenever we think, anybody in this room, myself included, even after 18 years of being clean and sober, whenever I think about society having a party or going out and having fun, substances are involved in my mind, at least. Not necessarily that I'm gonna do them, but everybody else is gonna be doing them, right? Whether we can control it or not. So it's really important that we try to find and continue to support other ways of having fun that aren't necessarily centered around substances, even as adults, right? There's another stage called maintenance, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's just easier for your brain to handle the fluctuations up and down. So that's a little bit about it. Buddy's gonna come talk to you. You don't have to worry about the QR codes. Buddy's gonna come up here now and talk to you a little bit about all kinds of stuff, but particularly about how we talk to our kids about substances, all right? So thank y'all. And then I'll be back up again. We'll have questions. We'll do Q&A here in a little bit too. Oh, it's all right. Y'all get them to you, Kendall. It's all right. We'll get them.
I recognize that. I'm Buddy Gerber. I'm the director of the Center for Students in Addiction Recovery at Texas Tech University. Also teach a couple classes there. So in the immortal words of Jim Croce, you never tug on Superman's cape, you never spit into the wind, You don't pull the mask off of a Lone Ranger, and you don't follow Cole. Didn't go over as well as I thought it would. Maybe not a lot of Jim Croce fans out here. So we're going to talk about substance use. Specifically, I'm going to talk to you from a little different standpoint of what Cole was. He's looking at, how drugs affect the brain, what that looks like when it becomes addiction, and what the process is even into the beginning stages of recovery. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit, we're going to move back a little bit to that point that he first talked about, where he talked about where, a young person is trying to find those things that gives them some ease and comfort in those tough situations. And so how do we talk to students? How do we talk to our kids that way? I don't know which way that goes. Okay, so how many of y'all have kids? How many of y'all ever thought this question right here? And then you might think that one too. And once your kids get a little older, you might even get there. So we're worried about it, that they're going to be exposed to it. Then we get worried that maybe they are, and then we catch them doing it. And how do we deal with that? There's a couple things I want to talk about, and one of them just kind of came to me while I was sitting there listening to Cole. That's some research done by Dr. Anna Lembke out of Stanford. I don't know if any of y'all have ever read her book. It's called Dopamine Nation. It's a great book if you ever want to read it. And so her big deal is right now, she's phenomenal researcher, understands the brain as well as anybody. She's a neuroscientist, PhD, psychologist, psychiatrist, the whole nine yards. But her thing right now is technology. Where is it? This pocket. She calls this a modern-day hypodermic needle. And we laugh about that, but if we look at our youth today, because I've got kids, this is attached, right? So the studies that she's done has shown that while being connected to technology, where Cole was talking about that dopamine spike when you take drugs, right? And our intuitive thought would be, well, the dopamine's going to go up from being on technology, right? No, it goes the other way. It goes down. So if you stay on technology long enough, and if you've done this, and I have, if you've done this, then at some point, you kind of start feeling, ugh. Y'all ever been on that TikTok roll, and then you go, ugh. So that's what our kids are doing. So if our kids are doing that, dopamine goes down, and then now we're at this, how do I feel better? So they're going to look for ways to feel better. That's where we have to be very proactive in how we do things. So I will also tell you that the Texas School Survey that does surveys on schools, we finally got it done here in Lubbock over the last couple of years, which has been a challenge, but thankfully LISD has been really involved in that, so it's a great thing, so we can actually get some data out of here. We know that about 10 to 20%, kind of a big, but 10 to 20% of high schoolers in Lubbock have used marijuana in the last 30 days. There's about 1% that has used another type of illicit drug. 20 to 40% have used alcohol in the last 30 days. And 15 to 20% have binged on alcohol in the last 30 days. It means they've had 5 drinks or more at one setting. So we know that it's there. And the question is, how do I talk to my kids about that? All right? How do I sit down with my children and have this conversation of, are you using drugs? Do you know about drugs? This is your brain on drugs, all of that stuff. I got some good news and I got some bad news. The good news is I'm going to give you some ideas. The bad news is you don't talk to them about drugs. So if you think you're going to sit down with your kid and have a conversation about using drugs or drinking alcohol, they will tune you out in a heartbeat. So what do I say? Well, it depends. My class is at Tech, but they made fun of me yesterday, one of them. I teach on the intro to addiction, and so we talk about how addiction and recovery, but we've been going through, how does addiction happen, and there's 10 jillion different ways that it happens. And so I asked the question. I was talking about something the other day, and somebody asked a question, and I looked at one of the students who's always mouthing off, and I said, well, what's my road answer? And he said, it depends, maybe, possibly, I don't know. Because see, we think we know a lot of stuff, but we really don't about how addiction happens. We know a lot more stuff about how recovery happens. And we actually know some stuff about how prevention works and what good prevention looks like. So, what do I say? If I'm in that last group, right, or in that first group, I'm worried about it. Well, it depends. It can range from nothing, you say absolutely nothing about drugs, to setting some boundaries. If your kid has come home and the police have brought him home, or you've had to go get him at the police station, then maybe you're going to do something like maybe there's some counseling or drug testing that you're going to require from them, or maybe some monitoring of some sort. But that's because we already know. There's no more talk about it. We've already gotten to that point. So we're going to have some intervention of some type. But if we're not there, what do you say? Well, the other part of it is, who do teens talk to? And Cole talked about HERD, and I'm a member of HERD, and we really, the folks on it, we've been doing it for a few years now. I think 6. And so we did a survey several years ago with students in Lubbock County. Right now, we just opened up a couple of weeks ago a survey for parents. Now, I didn't put the QR code up here because I didn't want you getting your phones out and taking pictures of me because you didn't know how to use it to get a QR code with your phone. But if you will go out to the HERD table, there's a flyer there or a QR code where you can go on and take the survey. It takes like 5 minutes. Guys, seriously, if you're a parent, we want your input because your input helps guide us in what we can do. All right? So we did this survey with students, and we asked a number of questions, But one of the questions that we really wanted to know was, who do you talk to if you had a substance use issue? Who would you talk to, or who do you talk to? And you can see on here, we got doctor, school counselor, parent, teacher, friend, sibling, minister. Well, any school counselors out here? Don't raise your hand. They talk to you the least. Y'all probably already knew that. And it depends on their age, but you can see here parents, and if we go back, we started this at like 13 years old. When they're 13, they talk to their parents. By the time they get to be 16, guess what they get? They get a little more mobile. 17, they talk to their parents less. But they talk to their friends, and you can see that jump goes from those 6 points there, end up over here, right? So they talk to their friends. Now, that can be good and it can be bad, because if I've got those friends that tell me the good stuff, then it's okay. But if I got those friends that are going to lead me in a different direction, I'm going to do that. And one of the things that we do, I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox, so that's okay. One of the things that we do is we use these scare tactics, right? We use these things like, oh, you shouldn't use drugs. And we go through all this stuff and we show them videos of people using drugs and dying. And we did the DARE program for a number of years until we finally figured out that it was actually causing them to use drugs and not. And so, I mean, seriously, if you didn't know that, DARE, the research from it has shown they actually caused people to use drugs. And so the scare tactics don't work. And here's why they don't work. Here's a big reason they don't work. We scare them. And this is this 15 to 20% that we're worried about. And then they go with these friends because that's who they talk to. And their friends say, hey, here's a joint, try it. And they take a hit off of it and they go, whoo, this feels good. Those people were lying to me. They were lying to me. I don't believe a word they say. So everything goes out the window. So we got to look at who we're talking to. Now, do they talk to parents? Absolutely. Do they want to talk to parents? Absolutely. But why do they quit talking to parents? Let's talk about that. So, what works? This is called the Icelandic model. If anybody knows me very well, I talk about two things when it comes to this kind of stuff. I talk about the Icelandic model and I talk about Project Match. And nobody likes either one of them because they're just too simple. We want it difficult, right? We want we got to come up with a new thing to do. It's just pretty simple. So this happened in Iceland. In 1998, Iceland was having a problem with their youth. And you can see on here that 43% of the 42% of the, and this is like 10th graders, this is like 15, 16-year-olds, 42% of them were drunk in the last 30 days. 23% of them were smoking marijuana. 17% of them were smoking. 17% of them had tried hashish, right? Those are huge numbers. And so they went, we got to do something. So they came up with this plan, this model that they developed. We looked at it over 20 years, what happened. The model's really simple. It's been replicated 4 times now. Of course, it's not as far along because they didn't do it until after they stopped, but it's been replicated 4 times now, and the initial findings are falling right in line with what they did with it. You can see that the drunk 42% in the last 30 days drops to 5%. That's dramatic, right? What do you think they did? They never talked about drugs or alcohol. Number one, they gave every family a stipend so that they could afford to eat dinner together at their table in their house 4 days a week. They also gave them a stipend where they gave them $500 where they could go on a family vacation in the summer because $500 covered a week-long camping trip so that everybody could afford to do that. They also provided after school activities, whatever they wanted to do. Whether if they wanted to go play soccer, they had a soccer coach. If they wanted to go play music, they had musicians that were teaching them. If they wanted to learn auto mechanics, they took them to a garage. If they wanted to do this, they did that. And if they did this for a couple of days and they went, I don't like that much, I'm going to do something else, they would go do something else. And they did that, I think it was 3 days a week, 2 hours after school, every day. They were given that opportunity. They bussed them around, took them to these places. That's it. That's all they did. Why does it work? We'll work on a number of different ways. So Cole talked about how football, could work. Well, those things work, but what happens is they get this sense of purpose. the sense of purpose that fits of who I am. I feel like I am somebody. And it's not forced. See, we're really bad about that. You're going to go to a dance. You're going to go to football. You're going to go to this. It's good for you. If they like it, it's good for them. If they don't like it, it's terrible for them. If they have to be forced to do it, it's not good. I'm a product of that. So they got to do things that they wanted to do. And then they found their spot. They found their calling. Any soccer fans in here? Okay. The kids out of this group, they beat England in the World Cup. Iceland beat England in the World Cup because these kids went to soccer every day and learned from the best coaches and did it all the time, and it became their passion. It became what they liked doing. The musical group, and I always get this wrong, of Monsters and Men. Isn't that right? And they play that song that you hear all the time. Just look up Monsters and Men and you'll find the song and you'll go, oh yeah, I hear that all the time. They came out of this. There's a big deal in Europe and it's called Eurovision. And it's this big, it's kind of like, America's Got Talent, except a lot bigger. And each country has their own contestant. And it's usually the big country, it's usually France or England or, that win it, or Germany that win it every year. Iceland won it with these kids that were out of this group. It changed who they were, right? It changed who they thought they were. The key to a successful substance abuse prevention is an integrated, comprehensive, and evidence-based approach to 4 principal areas of a child's life: parents, peers, school, and organized activities. Those are the 4 keys right there. They paid so their parents would eat with them and go on a trip. Their peers, they became associated with in the activities that they were doing. And then their school was very supportive of them. They never talked about drugs or alcohol. Yet they quit doing them because they found better avenues. We don't get there by scaring them, questioning them, interrogating them. We get there by providing them the resources to do things that fits in what they want to do. So, what are the risk and protective factors? These are research things that we know. Children who have good relationships with their parents and consider them to be role models are more likely to engage in pro-healthy behaviors. I get to sit, and guys, trust me, I sit down, I got my oldest, he's at home right now, and who knows if he's going to ever do. He's in his senior year, and getting him to sit down anywhere right now is like pulling teeth. But we typically sit down, we don't as much right now, but we sat down with our kids for dinner several nights a week. We may not even talk about anything, but we were present. And when we did get to talk about something, they knew we would listen. Family support is also associated with abstinence as well as improved psychological and social health outcomes and effective friendship choices. How I'm supported by my family is going to determine who I'm going to pick out for my friends. What are we modeling as parents? Right? When my kid sees me, what does he see or she see? And she goes, I want to hang out with somebody like him because I really like him. I like who he is. I respect who he is, and I want to hang out with somebody like him. But if I'm acting like a jackwagon, guess who they go hang out with? The jackwagons, right? If I'm getting drunk every night, guess who they go hang out with? The people getting drunk every night. So what I model at home matters, absolutely matters. Participation in supervised youth activities deters adolescent substance use, absolutely. But the caveat to that is unforced. They get to pick it. So my wife will tell you, our second oldest daughter went off to school, bright kid, future in front of her, freshman year, pre-med, goes the first semester, makes a 4-point, calls me at semester, or when she's about to start back to school, and we're sitting there in the living room, and she calls me. She said, hey, I got to talk to you. I said, what's wrong? She said, thinking about changing majors. And I said, well, is pre-med just too hard? And she said, oh, no, it's not hard. I do it easy. I could become a doctor. That's not that big a deal. I could do that. I have the capacity to do that. I just don't want to. And I said, great, then what are you going to change your major to? And she said, event planning. Now, my wife will tell you that my face did something, but my voice didn't, right? Oh, good for you. Go get them. She has a highly successful event planning business in Northwest Arkansas right now, just absolutely killing it because she found what she loved. She found where she fit. Could she have done the other one? Absolutely. She's smart enough to do it. But she got to pick, not me. We got to remember that. We got to remember that. We sometimes think we know what's best for our kids. Maybe not. Engaging youth is an essential component of effective youth development and increases the likelihood of positive outcomes for youth. Engaging youth. Quit ignoring them. Right? How do we engage them? How do we bring them in? How do we connect with them? And it's going to look different for everybody, right? There is no flow chart that says I do X, Y, and Z. It's how do I connect with my kid? How do I connect with my kids' friends? We have our youngest on the tennis team, and the tennis team is in our house all the time, and I'm really getting tired of feeding 16 and 17-year-old boys. Not really. I love it because they're there, right? And we hang out with them a little bit and then leave them alone, and we get to be involved and engaged. How do we keep doing that? So what's it all mean? What it means is it's all about relationships. It's all about those connections that we have with our children, with our children's friends, with our children's friends' parents, with our children's teachers, with our children's mentors. It's all about connection and relationships. Kids need our time, our presence, our care, and our consistency. You know that deal that was talked about with the Cole said about the brain, and it remembers that last time I did that, I got soothed. Well, if it worked last time and I'm not consistent, then it doesn't work this time, so they quit doing it. So I got to be consistent with it. I'm going to step on a lot of toes, and that's okay. If you're at meetings 5 nights a week or 3 nights a week and you're not at home with your kids, quit. Those meetings are not that important. If you're out trying to help other people's kids and not staying with yours, quit. It's not that important. We got to be consistent. Teens need an outlet that is productive. They got to find their own way. They got to do their own thing. And whether that's comic books or track or playing music, whatever it is, let them find it and foster it. And above all, they need connection. And you get to decide if it's with you or with somebody else. That's the choice you get. Now, how am I going to have that conversation with them about drugs? You don't. Because here's the thing. When you have that relationship, when they got a question about drugs and alcohol and sex and various other things, they're going to ask you because they know they can. But if they don't think they can, they won't. And they're going to ask Jimmy down the street, who's going to give them some bad advice. That's what we have to do as parents. That's how we talk to our children. I don't even know what time it is. Oh, I'm good. I'm good. We're good, aren't we? We ready to take questions? Okay. Cole will answer all your questions. That one will work. Oh, no. Oh, they're all off.
Here, let's do that one handheld, walk around, and we'll just...
Yeah, we can talk to the mic up here.
So we'll talk on the podium, and you talk.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, that was so great. Thank you all so much. Now it's time for a Q&A. So don't be afraid to raise your hand or speak up and ask some questions. And yeah, have an open discussion. Okay, let me.
Okay, I have a question. So what do you guys think if, like, we're from a rural community, we're from Hereford, so, and we are the substance prevention program for Hereford ISD to go in and educate the kids, but also communities and parents. But we have a lot of parents that are out at the meatpacking plants working, 12, 18-hour, whatever shifts, and they're just not home with their kids. So do you believe that we can make that same impact not being their parents? Or do you have any advice for us in that situation?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. You want this back? I'm a loud person. I really don't need
No, you're good. I don't know what's working.
Okay, I got a loud voice. Yes. 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 So, in a perfect world, right, they have the parents at home. But we know that there's an imperfect world. And so you create relationships with adults that can foster that same sort of thing. It's a little more difficult. If they have grandparents, if they have aunts and uncles. Get them involved too. But mentorship, so it's always amazing to me when you see highly successful people, right? And they give a talk. They will very often mention a teacher, a mentor, a neighbor, somebody other than their parents who was the person who believed in them. And so I phrase this in the framework of parents. Parents, family of choice, family of origin, whatever the case may be, but some sort
I have a question about the Icelandic study. Is there anybody in the United States that have put this into practice instead of billions of dollars that we waste in certain areas of addiction treatments? And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it is not been replicated in the U.S. for a multitude of reasons that you can probably figure out. It takes a coordination of a lot of different parts. Iceland is by, and when I say Iceland, this was basically Reykjavik, which is pretty much Iceland. But they've done it in a province in Canada, and it has been successful so far there. They've done it in a couple of smaller island countries, and I believe it's in Spain where they've also done it. And so some of those are like in the first couple of years, and so it's kind of hard to tell exactly. But what we're seeing that movement, it would be very difficult. Is it working? All right. Is that better? Oh, much better on my throat. It would be very difficult to get the political capital to get that done in the United States. I mean, we have trouble, paying teachers. We're not going to pay after school stuff. So yeah.
I think it would be best done from a state perspective, right? I think that's the hard part, is that even if the federal government kind of mandated it, quote unquote, it would still be the state's responsibility to implement in some way. And that's where you get the pushback, right? Because if there's a Democrat president or Democrat in office, the Republican states are going to push back, and vice versa. Republican in office, the Democrat states are going to push back. And so I think if it were to work, probably a smaller state that has a better budget and willing to spend on Connecticut, Vermont, some of those Northeast states that already spend money on education and some of these things probably have the best shot at it right now. But if they can do it, if we can get somebody to do it, even if we do it as a county or as a region or as a city somewhere, right, then that can build on itself. Part of the reasons people haven't heard of it is because it's in Iceland. But if you do it in Vermont, people might hear of it, right, or whatever, or Texas.
I had a couple questions. I'm over here. We were actually talking about this at our table today about whether we should make our kids do certain things. And my daughter later on said, I wish you would have made me do this thing. So that was one thing. And then we had one of our people that we were talking with was Alateen. And she doesn't know what, she's made her go, but then she's like, I don't know if I should make her go. It's like, I know it'll be good for her, but, with you talking about how we shouldn't force our kids to do certain things that we know would be good for them. What's your take on that?
So a couple of things. One is, and I didn't clarify this well enough, so I'm going to clarify it here a little better. 80% of the students that we're talking about, they don't need anything. They're not going to have a substance use problem, right? They're just not going to have one. We know that from if you look, about 20% or so are actually using some things, 20 to 25%. So 75% of them aren't doing anything. So that group is not, so for that group, I don't know, you could probably maybe do it however you want to do it. That's why when we do some of this prevention and we go in and go, oh, see, 75% of them aren't using. Of course, because 75% of them weren't going to use if you did it or not. I mean, I like those deals. I'm a winner. The problem arises that when you have someone that's struggling in that way, if you force them, and I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I can tell you, and I'll let Cole speak to it from a treatment perspective, but I can tell you, if you force people, you better have as the judge was talking about earlier, he can force people because he has control, right? You better have a lot of control if you're going to force somebody. You better be able to completely control their life if you're going to force them. If you can't, all you're going to do is they may go, but they're not going to get anything out of it.
Mine, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old right now. All right. So I'm walking this out. And I feel like I've done a really good job of being a good example in my household of what not to do with substance use. Right. Like I've talked to them a lot about it. My daughter goes to Friendship and they're having like a fentanyl, education thing tomorrow. And all week long, she's been like, please sign so I don't have to go. It's going to be so boring. I know everything already. All the other kids, sure, they have to go, but you talk about this stuff all the time, right? What I'm not a very good example of is appropriate boundaries around my social media usage or cell phone usage, right? Some of these other things that we don't necessarily talk about as much. And so I'm constantly fighting that battle, especially with a 12-year-old girl, of it's not so much of making them do something that I think they should be doing, it's making them do something, right? And so I don't necessarily have to dictate what that thing is. I just need to make sure they get to the table and start doing something. So sometimes that looks really rough though, because if I come to her and I say, all right, look, you've got to do something, it could be piano lessons, it could be dance, it could be crocheting, it could be, fill in the blank, right? Whatever it is, she's going to go, nah, none of those sound good. I don't want to do any of those. And I'm just going to get pushed back over and over again. So you might have to make an executive decision on their behalf and just push them into something, right? And then go get that feedback though. Don't stop there and just say, okay, well, they're in piano lessons now, so everything's all right. I feel good. I'm doing my job, right? Check back in with them because they will. If they're going to piano lessons every week and they hate it, then they're going to tell you that they hate it. And then boom, now you've got your dialogue. Look, I've shown you that I have control. I've shown you that I'm going to make you do some resiliency things. And now I'm here to listen to you and have dialogue. So now you can talk about it. You don't want to do piano? What do you want to do? Now they're more receptive to some of these things. We do family movie night in my house every single week. And every single week, it is like pulling teeth to get them to just sit down and watch a movie with us, y'all. Like, I am fighting and fighting and fighting them on it. So sometimes it's just a matter of pushing through that as a parent or as a caretaker, right?
Thank you for answering that. I had one more question. Okay, so I'm going to tell on myself. I'm a grandmother, and
That's okay.
I have we got a program for that. So I have a granddaughter that's almost 7. And every time she's with me, she wants to watch my phone. And I'm like, am I pushing her towards addiction? I'm like kind of scared, Is that a thing?
I think as long as you have some respectful boundaries. So I'll tell you what mine is. I don't know if it even works, but I'll tell you what the boundary is in my house.
Yeah.
Our kids don't have a phone at 12 and 9. They just don't have one. There is an old phone of mine that doesn't have any social media. They listen to music on it occasionally. But then they have a Nintendo Switch, so they kind of have some access to some outside world.
She watches YouTube.
Yep, and
You
they
know.
get there's some filters and some content thing you can do there for one, and that's if you're giving it to them unabated. But 2 things: one, they only get it Friday night after school, Saturday, and part of Sunday, and if they want to use it, they're in the open. They're not in their room. They're not laying in their bed with the device against the wall to where nobody can see what they're actually looking at. And so it kind of, I don't know if it works or not, but it cuts down on some of that sneakiness that I think all kids kind of have a propensity for at times, right? So again, I'm not saying that works. That's just what we've come up with. And the kids know that boundary. Like they don't even, we don't have fights anymore on Wednesday night about whether we should have the device or not, because they just know that it's at the top of Dad's closet until Friday after school. So have some boundaries. Set those boundaries for yourself and for your family. Talk about it with your kids or your spouse or whoever it is that you're trying to create those boundaries with those kids.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we understand that. I hope that you understand, at least where I'm from, and I'm sure that Cole's from also. There is no perfect, right? So, see, our problem is that sometimes we try to be perfect, and how do I get this exactly right? There is no getting it exactly right. There is continuing to try and continuing to. So I would say, I can assure you. Now, my mom didn't let him. My mom was a little rough, but the other grandma let him do anything they wanted to. But I think that, are you there with her while she's doing it? Are you having conversation with her while she's doing it?
Sometimes she's like, she'll turn it away. She doesn't want me to see.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and I would just say, no, let's watch this together.
okay,
Or not at all. Yeah.
okay.
And not only that, but how many of us in here, if like I know I can be vulnerable, but how many of us in here actually think that we've got all of our coping skills in order and we're like I got, you know what I mean? So we can't expect 13, 14, 15-year-olds to just like get it all. So y'all, they're gonna have trouble coping with life and they are going to get into things that we don't want them to get into, right? It's a matter of, are we there? Have we fostered the relationship enough to where whenever they do get there, that they feel comfortable talking to us about it, right? It's the same thing, he said it earlier, but I tell this to like people go out, like we have marketers and stuff, or we don't really, but we did have marketers at stages, right? And so they'd always go, how did I do? I feel like how did I do when I was talking to that person? Did I sell stages well enough? And I go, I don't care about any of that. All I care about is if you build a relationship with this person, whenever they're going, hey, who do I know that does substance use treatment? Who do you think they're gonna think of? They're gonna think of the person that's been building a relationship with them this whole time, right? And so that's what we're trying to do with kids, is just build a relationship with them. They know, like I guarantee you, Jafar's kids know that they can come talk to him about anything, right? And he's gonna be there for them, right? Because he's been there and he's established that relationship. So the more you can do stuff like that, it's gonna go a long way, for sure. That's a good question.
And I want to tell the grandparents in the room, because I'm guessing there's probably more than one. Y'all are in the perfect spot, right? I mean, you got like a lot of extra chips that parents don't have. And so you get to create a relationship that kid's probably going to come to you. I can assure you I would have gone to my grandparents before I went to my parents with something really tough. I'd have gone to one grandparent. But that's, you have the opportunity. And so that's when we go back to this deal you were talking about in the small town. We create these relationships. We surround, it takes a village, and we surround them with these relationships so that they have the best opportunities. Any other questions?
Does anybody want to know more about HERD? Does anybody have any questions about HERD or the coalition? You should come and join us. We meet on some Wednesday. What Wednesday is it, Macy?
Third Wednesday.
Third
of every
Wednesday.
month.
I can't even remember which one it is.
Next Wednesday.
I know it's next Wednesday. So next Wednesday at the health department, the new health department building at 21 something 50th Street. 2113? Is it 13?
I think it's 15.
Dang. I was so close. You would have found it. If you went to the 2100 block of 50th Street, you'd have found the health department. So it's 2015. That's good. 2015 50th Street. You just show up. You don't even got to tell us. Just show up. We'd love to have you. It's at noon. And we're going to feed you noon. It's at noon. And honestly, we've got quite a bit of professional buy-in, right? We've got people from the community. We need more parents. We need more kids. We need more teens in the teen awareness group. We need y'all, because the parents are making a big difference in our community, and they're not necessarily getting this education. So please join HERD.
Go stop by the HERD. If you don't want to be a part of HERD, great. But go by the HERD table and get the link for the survey and take the survey, because that helps us.
You can also follow us on social media. HERD's on Facebook, HEARD, like I heard you, right? Instagram, I mean. I think, anyway, if you follow us on Instagram and MySpace, there's you'll find access to the survey there too. That might, rather than flooding the table, you can flood the table. But if you don't want to be part of that line, then by all means, you can do it right now on your phone. Please, 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 we really, really need, we've got the research from the kids. We need as much parent buy-in in our community to get this data. because then we can turn around and we can go to the school board, we can go to our city council, we can go to our mayor, we can go to our governor, we can go to our city reps, right? I mean, U.S. representative state reps, right? And tell them, we have statistics that show this is what parents are talking about, this is what parents think. Let's do something about it, right? And so we really need your help. So please, please, please be a part of that. And if you hear about one of these town halls, feel free to come. I know not everybody had a bunch of questions about what we talked about because y'all know a lot of this stuff already, just working in this profession. But just know that this was something, you just got to peek behind the curtain of what HERD does. And we want to come do that for you and your constituents, your consumers, your clients. So if you are interested in us and coming, totally free. We do all the marketing. We make the flyers. All you got to do is send an email out and tell people to show up. That's it, right? So we'd love to come and do that on your behalf. So thank y'all so much.